So I've gotten a lot of comments about wrinkles, and so I wanted to do this first project here 2 different ways. So we're going to do the electrical outlet cover with one technique and the light switch cover with a different technique. And to get a different comparison of the surface once it is complete, I want to use the same napkin for both of these, and that's why I'm using something very similar for the base as well. So you can kind of compare and contrast the differences between both of these techniques. So to start out, I am just going to remove the back 2 layers of this napkin. And as you can see, this second layer is giving me a little bit of trouble. It did not want to come off there at first, but that's okay. We were able to remove enough of that to be able to make our project. And now that our napkin is all prepped, I did grab the light switch cover, and we're going to start with that one. And I'm positioning the napkin over the top of it just to figure out exactly how I want to place this on top of the light switch cover. Now make sure on this, because it's kind of a rounded edge, that you have enough extra napkin to go all the way to the very edge of these light switch covers. And once you're done cutting out a little piece of this napkin, we'll save the remainder of the napkin for the next light switch. So now that we have our napkin positioned the way that we would like it, I'm going to remove it from the cover and grab my Mod Podge. Now the Mod Podge I chose to use for this was the hard surface Mod Podge, and my thought process on that was that it's typically used for furniture and different things that are more of a harder surface that might get touched a little bit more. And I felt like with a light switch and an electrical cover, they're going to get touched, and I wanted to make sure I was protecting them the best that I could. And once I've coated the whole entire light switch with my Mod Podge, I grab my napkin. Next, I just hold that napkin over the top of the light switch until I'm satisfied of the positioning, and then I just lightly lay it down over the top. Now let's grab some cling wrap. And I'm going to take a small piece of cling wrap and lay that over the top of the napkin and then smooth everything out. The cling wrap helps prevent you from tearing the napkin because it's such a fine piece of paper, and also takes out any of those wrinkles that might be there. And once you're done smoothing everything out, remove the cling wrap and let it dry. And now that our piece is dried, I'm going to place this on a little cup just to elevate it a little bit. Next, I grab more of the same hard surface Mod Podge, and I'm just going to do a light coat over the top of the whole entire light switch. Then I'm going to let this dry till it is dry enough to not be tacky, but not completely dry. So about 15 minutes. Then I take a piece of cling wrap and I wrap it around my finger, and I just start rubbing it along the top of this light switch. And that's going to just remove any of those wrinkles before it is completely dry. And then a little over an hour later, I did repeat the exact same steps. I did another coat of the Mod Podge, and I let it dry for about 15 minutes. And then I took that same piece of saran wrap and I went ahead and I just smoothed anything out that might have popped up. And once that is completely dry, I grabbed my zip sander, but a sanding block would work just fine. And I went ahead and I sanded in a downward motion around the perimeter of the light switch cover to remove all of that excess napkin. Now to remove the center piece of that napkin, I'm just going to take a razor blade and I'm just going to trim that out. And once I removed that piece of napkin from the center there, I grabbed my Mod Podge and a tiny little brush here, and I just went ahead and I brushed around the inside of that hole there, just to make sure none of that napkin would catch when you were turning the light on and off. And once that dried 15 minutes later, I went back in with my cling wrap and I just made sure that no extra wrinkles appeared. And here is what our wrinkle-free light switch looks like. It turns out so great. Now let's move on to technique number 2. So we're going to be starting out by painting the Mod Podge on half of our electrical cover here. And once we have that spread out evenly, I'm going to take my napkin and place that just gently over the top. And using some cling wrap, we're going to smooth everything down, and then we're going to repeat the same steps on the other half. And before that dries, go ahead and remove that cling wrap. Now, once that has completely dried all the way, we're going to carefully take a sanding block, or I'm using a zip sander here, and I'm just going to lightly sand in a downward motion to remove any excess paper. Now, you have to be really careful with this since we haven't sealed anything in yet, so just go really carefully and take your time. And now that we have all of our excess napkin removed, I grab my Mod Podge and my brush, and I'm just going to add a tiny bit of Mod Podge around the perimeter of this cover. And then I'm going to just set this on a little cup and let it dry. And once this is completely dry, I'm going to take my razor blade and just cut out the extra napkin inside that outlet frame. And just like we did for the light switch cover, I'm going to take a little bit of Mod Podge and we're going to seal in the perimeter of the outlet frames. And now that we have all of our prep work done, I am going to go ahead and just tape this down to a piece of cardboard using some painter's tape. And to seal this outlet cover, I am going to be using some matte clear enamel from Rust-Oleum. And I did 2 coats of this enamel to seal everything in. And once everything is dried, this is what our electrical outlet cover looks like. And I just love how this turns out. This is such a great alternative for sealing in your decoupage projects. I just think this is a great tool to have in your toolbox. It doesn't work for everything, but it's a wonderful way to ensure you don't have any wrinkles. And here is a side-by-side comparison. Number 1 is using the Mod Podge and Saran Wrap, and number 2 is using a spray matte enamel. And this piece was inspired by a viewer's comment. So if you enjoyed this piece, please let me know in the comments below. And if there's something you'd like to see me decoupage, leave a comment and I will make sure to read them and try to incorporate them into my videos. Thanks! Let's take some terracotta pots and make an adorable piece for our yard. I'm starting out with 4 2-inch pots, 1 3-inch pot, and an 8-inch saucer. And I did find all of these at my local Walmart. We're going to be starting out by painting our saucer. And I'm taking this Martha Stewart silver paint here, and we're going to paint the center of our saucer. And while that is drying, I am going to go and paint my 4 little pots and the 3-inch pot. We're using our metallic green paint from Folk Art to paint these, and we're going to paint the outside and inside of these pots. Now, I did end up doing 2 coats of paint on this since I am going to be placing these outside. I want to make sure we have a nice coat on these. Next, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my little saucer here. And I am going to flip this saucer over and we're going to paint the back side of this saucer the same metallic green. And once everything is painted on the back side of this saucer, I will wait till it is dry and flip this over. And then I'm going to take that green metallic paint and I'm going to go around the rim of the saucer. And now that everything is dry, let's go ahead and grab some Loctite glue. I got this at Lowe's and it works really good with terracotta pots. So I'm going to take this Loctite and we're going to go ahead and take the 4 2-inch pots and we're going to add them to the base of our saucer here. And you can see that I have the saucer flipped over. I'm going to position them how I would like them. Then I'm going to add this power grip to the pots and then add that to the saucer. This is going to take a little while for it to dry, so I let this sit overnight. So the next day, I went ahead and I flipped this over, and this is what our little piece looks like. I'm going to take this piece outside, and I want to go ahead and seal this right now. And to seal this, I'm using Rust-Oleum Clear Enamel. And now that our piece is sealed, I'm going back into my craft room, and I'm grabbing my fragment effects, and these are little glass chips. And I'm going to add them to the top of my saucer here. And I'm using the 2 different color greens that I have here from Plaid and a clear and a blue. And this just gives a really beautiful look inside of our saucer. Now, if you haven't used these before, you can find these at Walmart, and I've seen them on Amazon. So I'll put a link for those in my description box below. But I personally like to use these with resin. You can also buy a Fragrant Effects glue that you can use as well, but you'll have more of a bumpy edge, which is fine if that's the look you're looking for, but I like a smooth look with the resin. And once you're satisfied with your glass chips, go ahead and mix up some resin. I know that some of you may not have done this before, but this I got from Amazon. I have tried the resin from the Dollar Tree as well, and it works great. So if you're using that resin, you would probably want 2 A's and 2 B's to have enough for this piece. But I buy it in bulk on Amazon. So you just mix 1 part to 1 part, and you stir it together. And now I'm just going to pour this over the top of my glass chips. Now, you may start to see that there'll be a few little bubbles popping up here. And what I'm going to do to remove those bubbles is I use a heat tool, and I just go ahead and I kind of warm the resin up, and it allows those bubbles to pop so we have a nice smooth surface. And if you don't have a heat tool, a hair dryer works just fine. Next, I go ahead and let this resin sit overnight to dry. Now with that leftover 3-inch pot, I'm going to set this down onto an egg carton just to help me stabilize it so I can paint it. And I'm taking some multi-surface paint here from Folk Art, and I'm starting with the parchment paint. And I'm using a Q-tip to add little eyes to our piece. And this is just the base for our piece. I wanted these eyes to be silver, but I wanted to make sure they showed up nicely on that green. So I'm using that silver metallic paint that we used earlier on our saucer, and I'm going to add that over the top of the parchment paint. Next, I grab my multi-surface satin black paint, and I'm going to go ahead and just finish the face for my little turtle. Now we're just going to add a little bit of black to our eyes, and then we'll let this dry. And for our final touch on our eyes, I'm going to add just a small little bit of that parchment paint. I took this outside and sealed the face with the matte clear enamel. And now that that resin has cured, we're going to grab the Loctite Power Grab, and we're going to add that to the top of our piece. We're just going to make a little circle there, and then we'll go ahead and add our little turtle head. And once everything has dried, our final step is adding a little succulent plant to the top. This will just finish this whole piece off. Now I'm going to go set this in my garden. I just love how this decor piece turns out. The resin just sparkles with the sun and the glass chips, and the little plant on top looks adorable. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps my channel grow. Thanks! Today's video is part of the Everything Crafting Top Craft playlist. Be sure to check out these amazing creators down in the description box below. Thank you for watching, and back to our video. Did you know you can decoupage on a non-traditional surface? Something that may be lumpy and not smooth? Well, this basket we are going to decoupage with this beautiful flower napkin that I got from HomeGoods. So I'm going to start out by just opening up this napkin, and I'm going to flip this over and remove the back 2 layers of the napkin. And I find using a little piece of painter's tape helps remove those back 2 layers. Now, once we have just the top layer of the napkin, we are going to take that napkin and try to fit it around our basket. Now, grabbing a pencil, I am going to lift this basket up, and I'm taking my pencil and I'm drawing a small line on half of the napkin around the white frame of the basket. Now I lay out my napkin and I grab a little container of some water, and I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm just going to paint the line that I drew with the pencil. And once we have our water line painted, I'm going to just lightly tear the napkin on that first half. And then I take my little heat tool and I'm just going to dry the water that's on the napkin there before I move on to my next step. Once your napkin is completely dry again, I'm going to take this napkin and I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other half of this napkin. We grab that pencil and we're going to draw our line, and once we have our line drawn, I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to paint some water right where I drew the line so that I know where to tear the napkin. Now, using my paintbrush, I'm going to remove any straight edges from the sides of my napkin because I want to make sure that this napkin fades into the basket beautifully. And once I'm satisfied with all the tears in the napkin, I do go back in with my heat tool and make sure that the napkin is completely dry. Now let's go back to our basket. I want to make sure that this napkin is really bright on our basket, so I am going to add a little bit of plaster paint to the basket underneath that white line that was already there on the basket. Now, this doesn't need to be perfect, it's just going there to help brighten up the napkin when we decoupage it on. Now, once our paint has completely dried, I grab my Mod Podge, and I'm just using the classic Mod Podge in matte. And I'm taking my little napkin here, and I'm just going to set that over the top of my basket. Now I grab my Mod Podge brush, and I'm just going to decoupage over the top of this napkin. And I'm just going to paint that Mod Podge all over the top of that napkin on the basket. So once you're done applying all of your Mod Podge, we're just going to keep this basket set down upside down for about 2 hours to dry. So once our basket has completely dried, I go ahead and I start tearing off that napkin around the perimeter of our basket. And if I didn't mention it earlier, when I put the Mod Podge on, I only went to that white stripe on the basket. So that's why the napkin's able to tear so easily around the perimeter there. And you can see that I'm pushing my thumb down where I would like to tear the napkin, just so that nothing accidentally comes off from the bottom part of this basket before we seal it. So now here is what our basket is starting to look like. What we're going to do next here is grab our Mod Podge, and I'm going to take that Mod Podge and we're just going to brush that around the perimeter of our basket just to make sure that napkin stays into place before we seal everything. And then we set this aside to dry. And once that is completely dry, we're going to come back around with our Mod Podge and do a sealing coat. And I'm not going to show this on camera, but I did do 2 coats of the Mod Podge to seal everything in. And here is what our final basket looks like. I just love how this turns out. I think it just gives a unique spring look to our basket. This might be a good item to put in your living room so you can put your remote controls in there so you don't lose them, or your earbuds. This could also be used as a napkin display holder or anything else that you might find a use for baskets. So let me know what you might use it for. Please drop a comment down below. And if you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe or like button below. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you. So I just love this beautiful napkin, and I know it's not technically a Christmas napkin. I thought this would be beautiful for a Christmas ornament. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to flip this over, and I'm going to take a little piece of painter's tape and just remove the back 2 layers of this napkin. Next, I grabbed one of these ceramic ornaments, and I got these on Amazon in a 12-pack, and they were about $15 or $16, so a little over $1.25 an ornament, which I still thought was a really good deal. Next, I grabbed my Mod Podge, and I'm going to go ahead and just paint a nice thick coat over the top of this ornament. Then we're going to let this dry. Now we're going to take a quarter of the napkin that we prepped earlier and lay that right over the top of our ornament. Next, I layer a piece of parchment paper right over the top of our napkin. Now I grab my heat press, or a hot iron on low would work just fine, and you just go ahead and iron that napkin right on top of our ornament. Now I'm going to flip our ornament over, and we're going to repeat the same steps. Starting with our Mod Podge, we're going to paint a nice thick coat over the top of our ornament. Next, we're going to let that dry. Then we're going to layer our napkin with a piece of parchment paper on top, and using our hot iron, iron our napkin onto our ornament. And now that we have decoupage on both sides of our ornament, I am going to grab my zip sander, or you could use a sanding block if you'd like. And sanding in a downward motion, we're going to remove all of the excess napkin from our ornament. And I really like how elegant this is looking. That ceramic ornament really makes a difference when we're making these ornaments. Now, for my next step here, I am going to be using a really thin brush and some Mod Podge. And I'm going to be adding some Mod Podge on half of the ornament in different layers, just kind of around the flowers. It can be sporadic. It doesn't matter where you're adding this Mod Podge. You want the Mod Podge to be nice and wet still. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this foil paper, and I got this at Ben Franklin, but you can also get this on Amazon or at Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to start layering some of this gold foil over the top of my ornament. And don't worry if you have extra foil over the top of here, because it's only going to stick in the spots where you have the Mod Podge. Now, once you've let that sit for a minute, I go ahead and come in with my dry brush here, and I'm just going to start brushing off some of that foil from my little ornament. And it's going to just leave this nice little hint of foil all throughout the ornament, and it adds this beautiful sparkle. And then if you want to add any more foil to this ornament, just go back in and repeat the same steps. I used a little bit of Mod Podge, and I'm just going to tap some of those extra pieces of foil right on top of those spots. We'll let that dry for just a moment, and then we're going to grab our dry brush and brush any of the excess off. Once you've let the front side of this ornament dry, we're going to repeat the same steps on the back side of our ornament and then around the perimeter of our ornament. Now here is what our ornament looks like when the foil is complete. I did decide to make this a trio set, so I did 3 ornaments. For my next step, I'm going to be taking my weeding tool from Cricut, but you could use a toothpick or something sharp, and we're just going to re-poke the hole where we've decoupaged over for the ornament so we have a place to be able to hang our hanger. And before adding our hanger, I did want to seal these ornaments, so I took them outside, and using my Mod Podge and gloss, I'm going to go ahead and coat both sides of these ornaments. And now that these are sealed and dried, we're going to go ahead and add some finishing touches. I'm going to start out by taking this gold ribbon, and it's really thin. It's less than 1/4 of an inch. And we're just going to go ahead and make some nice gold hangers. And we could completely stop right here if you'd like, but I really wanted to add just a final little touch. So I had a lace panel in my stash that I got at a thrift store earlier last year, and I've been using it for various different crafts, and so I was able to cut a few little strips off of it, and I made 3 little bows. Next, I came in with some hot glue and I added a bow to each one of our ornaments. Then I added a small gold bow on top of the vintage lace just to give it a little bit more sparkle. And this is the same ribbon that I used for the hanger, so it ties the whole piece together. And now this beautiful trio set of ornaments is ready to display. I just love how these turned out. I think this is my favorite ornament set for the year. And I think these would be a wonderful gift for a hostess or to have on top of a present as a tag. This also would make a really fun ornament party with your friends. Every year I say I don't need anything more from the Dollar Tree. But every year in the spring, they come out with some new pieces in the Crafter Square section. And I really love this wood wreath that I found. So let's start out by grabbing our Waverly Antique Wax and staining both sides of our wreath. And if you haven't done this before, I just take a baby wipe and I wipe that wax all over both sides. And if it goes on too thick, no problem. Just grab another baby wipe and wipe off any excess. Now, while our wreath is drying, let's grab our Believe cutout. And I did get this at Dollar Tree, but I've seen similar ones at Walmart, Hobby Lobby. These are pretty easy to find. I'm going to set this down on a paintable surface, and I'm going to start out by taping this down so it's easier to paint. Next, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and a small brush, and we're just going to paint the top part of this Believe cutout. And once that paint has dried, I'm going to take that Waverly Antique Wax and I'm going to flip the Believe sign over, and on the back side, I'm just going to stain it with the wax. Now, once our Believe sign is complete, we are going to set that aside and work on our flowers. So these flowers I did get at Ben Franklin, but I've seen similar sets at Walmart as well and at Hobby Lobby. But any flowers that you prefer, you can get. So I'm just going to take this bundle apart and I'm going to start trimming up some of the pieces in this pick. And what you're going to see me do here is I'm just going to pick a few of the flowers off of this pick and clip them and make a little swag. And once I have the swag laid out how I would like it, I grab my floral tape and I'm just going to wrap that around a few of the stems here until everything is put together. And then I'm going to add the remaining picks to that same swag using the floral tape. And now that we have the base to our floral swag, I'm going to grab my twine. And I'm going to take that twine and I'm going to use that to wrap around where the floral tape is to cover that up and give it a more polished look. And once I was done wrapping around that twine, I just went ahead and I kind of tucked that into the twine that was there and used a little bit of hot glue to make sure everything stayed into place. Now let's go ahead and start putting everything together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a hanger for our wreath. One of the things that I've found from crafting through the years is that sometimes you start making a piece and you create the whole entire thing, it looks beautiful, and then you realize you don't have a good way of hanging it or displaying it. So it's one of the things that I really try to do while I'm creating the craft now is think about where I want to hang it or how I want to display it so that I incorporate the hanging method into the craft ahead of time so it's not an afterthought. So for this wreath, I'm just doing a quick twine hanger on it, but I want to do it before I add anything else to it. Now for the rest of the finishing touches, we're going to be using that believe sign we made, the swag, and 2 bows. And I'm going to take my time a little bit on this piece because I want to show you guys some of the little things that maybe don't show up in some of my videos. So before I glue anything, I always try to place the item that is going to be glued to it on top of the item first without gluing it. And sometimes I'm going to grab like a pencil or something like that to just kind of mark on the back piece where I want the glue. So I don't have a lot of excess glue popping out of my piece, so it looks so much more polished and finished when I do it. So that is what you are seeing me doing here with the believe sign. Next, let's go ahead and add that floral swag. And I'm going to put that right at the top of this wreath, right underneath where we put our hanger. So I'm just going to pull that hanger tight and then decide where I want to glue that. And we're going to just glue that into place. And next, I'm just going to hot glue my little bows onto the swag. So I'm starting out with a raffia bow first, which is a little bit bigger and it just gives it a really nice farmhouse look. And then in the center, I'm going to match everything up with the twine that we used earlier and put a bow right on top. And now our beautiful wood wreath is complete. I just love the look of this. This is so beautiful. I'm going to be hanging this in my office for inspiration. I feel like this is such a fun piece and you can exchange the words out in the wreath for something different that might inspire you. What word would you use to inspire you? Let me know in the comments below.